It's 7:02, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. And can we stand to say the pledge? Thank you. And I know this is our first meeting of this school year, which is a retreat. So we have a treat ahead with a short agenda. And I just really wanted to wish all of our board members and all of our families and members of the community wonderful first start of the school year week. I know there were a few little things along the way, but overall, I've heard great things about all of the schools once they get to school. Correct. So that's not on our agenda tonight, but I'm sure we'll get some sort of update, but soon. But I would like to turn to our first discussion item, which is the capital update, and I would like to hand the microphone over to Mr. Branyan and Mr. Watson, who I believe will take us through that.
Good evening, everyone. In front of you is the same format that has been presented in the past. We sort of create these buckets. I think it just helps sort of frame the conversation. You have that cover sheet that just shows you the macro level. I recognize that the same issue you had last year. This is at a high level, and that business meeting in September. The business meeting in September, you'll get the detailed sheets that give more in-depth conversation on this. But Dan and I and Patrick, we've been over the summer just putting this together. I'm just going to highlight a couple items and certainly take any questions you may have. Just under the information technology, the new addition was we added the smart board replacement program. But if you look at that, in the year we're building, just to level set everyone, is the 26-27. So that's that. What we show here is a 3-year total of a program that's been invested in. You really want to just hone in on that 26-27 column. It's 0 for smart board replacement, but as we're building the capital plan, we recognize that needs to be a replacement program, relatively substantial. However, working with the superintendent, we're going to spend the year making sure is that the right investment for technology in the classroom. So we've already invested in it, but whether or not that still needs to be reinvested going forward. So we just put it in here just as capital model discipline to make, if you know about the expense, put it in there in the model. But it's not an ask for the year we're building in 26-27. So that's the big highlight on the information technology. I'll pause there if anyone has any questions on IT before I move on to the next bucket.
Just might make sense for anybody watching at home and things to explain the numbers, but we know it's not $76. So you remember to explain the scale there.
Great point. It's in thousands. So it's in IT. So that's a great point. IT fiscal year 26-27. That 76 is actually 76,000. So that's just a great point to remind everyone that it's in thousands. Mike, do you mind to go to the next slide? They're just, if you're those playing at home, you can take a look at the sheet. An educational program, the one ad we had there was stage renovation, but you'll see that's in year 2028, 29, 30. We have some existing capital money already set aside for sort of the emergent or immediate stage renovation issues. Last year, we did an assessment. We had the assessment back. We built in the placeholder. We're giving our new coordinator some opportunity to digest on that report, and then whether or not how we make those adjustments in the 3 out years. But that's just a new item there. And we're still refining some of our pricing on the athletic fields, working with Pete. But other than that, nothing significantly major on the specialty programming.
Can I jump back one question? Because I know you just mentioned that, I'm sorry, for IT, you were talking about like the smart board replacement and you were looking to level set at 26-27, and that was what the 76K is. But under the next, the more detailed one, it has it under district network closets. So I was just confirming if I misheard. Or took my notes
I may
wrong.
have misspoke, but it's 76,000 is for the ongoing program for the HVAC district closet. Smart board replacement, we added the program, but we're not funding it in the year we're building because of the reasons I stated earlier.
Okay, thank you. I think I may have just misheard that, but I wasn't sure.
I'll take the hit. I misspoke.
Sorry, quick question. So the big things, just for those that can't see at home, I assume is 30 million for the pool replacement in 26, 27, and then Riverside is the big mover in 27, 28?
Yeah, I didn't mean to
Okay.
bury the lead, but yeah, that's the next.
Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone can see, because I was like, we're,
The very next section is the major building renovation. And that is where most of the conversation occurs. Let me jump to the big one. The biggest number is that GHS pool replacement. That is a placeholder. We think it's a realistic placeholder. We're in the process with the GHS pool feasibility committee. They're refining that. We met this afternoon, continue to go through options, but that is a placeholder for the number that was not on the capital plan last year. We recognized the end of school year last year with the pool issue. These worked over the summer, but that's a placeholder. We'll know more as we continue to go down the process, but absolutely, that's the biggest change. The capital plan is the 30 million. Is a placeholder. I just wanted to manage everyone's expectation. It's in all seriousness, usually when you publish a number, they say, well, that's the number. And this is a model that we're building a cap. It's a placeholder. The other item is to highlight is Riverside renovation. I'm well aware that the board made the adjustment last year. They moved that 43 to back to the 2 million that we did ask for. I think that was the move to show the level of support for that program. Just the way it works and the way it's going to be funded, it's best to show it in 27, 28. The building committee has yet to be formed. We anticipate it to be formed in the fall of this calendar year, but then you need to go through MI, hire the architect, do the construction design drawings, go work with the state. So I think realistically, even then it's, I think, still aggressive, but it's not appropriately placed from a budget perspective in 26, 27. It's best in 27, 28.
Placeholder?
It's still a placeholder. because-
Just checking.
But I just want to respect that the board did move it up, but here I'm presenting again, moving it out a year.
Might I make a tiny suggestion? Because I know we use the word placeholder here all the time and often people see the word. We talk about placeholder, we know the number is a placeholder, but somehow or another it leaves this room and other people see it and hone in on that number. Is there a way to maybe just put like an asterisk next to some of those numbers and then just saying below placeholder so it's on the document? So if people don't hear us talking about this in the meeting? Well, I think it's really just important because, we've gotten burned from that before, even though we're all very aware that a number is a placeholder and then somebody takes it as fact. I just want to make sure it's documented somewhere for anybody that didn't maybe see this meeting or read our minutes or whatever.
No,
Just in general, anybody from the public that's going to be looking on here for any reason.
I'd like to put a finer point on it. So if the pool comes in at actually $34 million, then we get accused of being 4 million over budget.
Exactly. That's why I just want to, I know the pool committee met today and I'm sure next week we'll get a great update from our committee rep. So, but thank you. That's a good point.
But just to put a finer point on this, those are probably the two biggest placeholders. The other ones are real numbers. We have refreshed those numbers, so we're relatively confident with those numbers. So I don't want anyone here or at home to think that we just have placeholders across the board. We have refreshed the numbers, going back up to IT with the 76,000 for the network HVAC. IT worked on updated numbers, even with the tariffs, all the thing. What's our purchasing power to maintain the program? We moved it up a little bit because of that. So we have refreshed the numbers where it's prudent, but those outer years, you're not going to have a good number. But it's a fair point, particularly those two projects are placeholders. The other ones, I would argue those right now are our best estimate and understanding of the scope.
Yeah, no, that's why I said most of the numbers that are in here, I would say are probably pretty much, nailed down within a few $1,000 one way or the other maybe. But when you're putting that in as as you even pointed out for Riverside, we don't even have a building committee yet. The pool is still, committee is still going through, a ton of information before they can get to an actual guesstimate of a true number. So I just want to make sure that when we, going into budget season, if somebody goes back and looks at this, it's very clear that those numbers were placeholders.
The pool was a thing that came up that was last year was the first time that got on our radar, right? Of like, I think an interesting, just in terms of what's actually helpful to advance the discussion, decision making, a very like with two huge items in 26 and 27, and then sort of a lull after that for a few years. I think a big thing would be to identify potential risks. So like the pool, I guess maybe I put it this way. If you have 75 million of major building renovations and there's a risk of another 100 popping up out of nowhere, that's a lot different than no risk at all of anything. And obviously there's never no risk, but I feel like identifying things that, hey, this is fine right now, but it could sort of break any moment, because that's where we usually get bit from a planning standpoint. I think if you were going to prepare something that helps the decision-making process, that would probably be useful to have. Like the pool, we probably knew 2 years ago that the pool was super old and its days were not forever. So if there's other things like that.
So if we're aware of it, we put it in here. I think the pool's a really good textbook example of, it wasn't even mentioned in the facility master plan years ago. It was just one of those assets that was, for whatever reason, wasn't captured in the plan. So I think when that came about, we talked about it at the board, it's like, we went through all our papers. Was it ever on a plan? It was never on the plan as any asset replacement. So that was an add. Dan and I, we have worked through, like, are we missing anything else? Right now, we're going to say we haven't. We have tried to move some of those other programs, like the North Street, North Miami ISD. We did move some of those out, recognizing they're still in the same order or the priority for the board, but recognizing there's a capacity issue and some of these big projects still. As we know, we're building Central Middle School. OG is going to be starting back up. We're in the middle of Julian Curtis. So there's a capacity issue as well. So we think it's right now is presented. We're not aware of anything missing. But if somebody wants to tell me something, I'll be happy to look into it.
Yeah, I guess the worry would be that if there was no note anywhere, it doesn't lend a lot of confidence to the process, right? It's like we got surprised by a $30 million thing that in retrospect doesn't sound that surprising because everyone knew the pool was super old. So like what would make it different this time that over the next 5 years you wouldn't worry that something else would pop up?
The old adage, hindsight is 2020. I 100% agree with you. That's it. We woulda, shoulda, coulda caught the GHS pool. The classic example is the roofs. We're constantly looking at what's the age of the roof, so we don't have this, oh, where'd the roof come from? Surprise, surprise. So we're trying to work on that model. The pool was just simply, it was one of those things that dropped through the crack. But as we sit here today, and maybe in a couple of weeks, I'm gonna say, oh, we forgot about this one. It is a living document, but we think we capture. I always keep saying, hey, we captured the known universe, and we've attempted to do that. So 2 examples: smartboard replacement wasn't on the program either. So we've captured it. But the nice thing about this is we put it out a year, so we're not asking for immediate funding, and we're giving us some planning time. The pool is just one of those things that absolutely caught us all off guard.
The pool sounds like a great thing for private fundraising. The new Anheuser-Busch GHS pool.
I think that would require a policy meeting because I don't think we're allowed to have alcohol on premises. But, Speedo, bring them in. Just saying. Laura?
So we got a question via email from one of the neighbors on Hillside asking about the second egress for GHS. And I don't see it anywhere on our plan, which makes me wonder if we are getting a second egress.
So that's a great segue. It's the Cardinal Field improvement, right under the major building renovations.
So that's not the visitor side bleachers.
No. The 7.5 that we're carrying in 2930 is the current placeholder for the driveway. We are in the process of we're probably hopefully a couple of weeks away of engaging an outside engineer firm to start to pick that program up. But that 7.5 is their carrying number right now. We've already you look in that line item 25, 26 to 150. we have 150,000 set aside last year for the A&E and the design work of that project. So and this is one of those issues, it would pop much easier when you had that individual project sheet. But from a macro level, we're still carrying it. And unless the board changes its priority, we're still keeping it as an important project to move forward.
So to make sure I
What,
understand. this.
yeah, I was
So
gonna say,
we're on the Cardinal Field improvement. So not the budget for preparing, but the one after that is when we're looking at feasibility for that. Is that right? The 1,500?
The ones, if you see that, the 150 in
Yeah.
25, 26, that's the money, that's the
Oh.
year we're sitting in.
Right.
So we got that.
Oh,
funding.
that's that. I was looking at the 1,500.
Yep, and then the 75,000 is actually, when you get the individual sheet, is for potential HVAC addition at the stadium. Then I think the 1,500 is a carpet replacement but then once we have more detail from the 150 with the architect, we'll figure out, where's that 7.5? Is that the right number for the driveway? Or what year does it make sense to fall into?
So right now, wait, I can't even read this. So right now, we're not expecting to spend a significant amount of money on that until 29-30. Yes?
As presented, yes.
And what about the visitor side bleachers?
I think because this project has been, we said last year as well, there's a lot of time between the last time we spoke about it and the funding. That's still, I think, going to be part of the scope when we look at the money that we have. Is that something we want to fund? But the driveway is the biggest driver of the project, and that's what we're focusing on. But I was just talking with Pete again this morning on the bleachers too. Everyone goes back and forth on the value of the bleachers.
The visitors don't have a big political constituency in Greenwich.
the other
Yes,
piece
but
of it
we
is,
sit there for graduation.
well, the other piece of it is that they were not in deteriorated condition. When we were looking at redoing the stadium, we were just like, how nice would it be to have a beautiful, brand new everything? But, when push comes to shove and you have to look at budget, we didn't replace the guest bleachers because they were in fine condition.
Didn't
And-
Joe Kelly actually take a hammer to it to prove that to us?
I believe he did.
I remember being on that tour.
Yeah. I'm sure he'd be happy to again. So, rather spend money where it's needed, instead of, just to make those look pretty.
One other question, because I'm sure it will come up. If we are adding a $30 million unexpected pool replacement, what the options are to mitigate that for things that are not costly to delay. Obviously, there are things that you delay and it costs a bunch of money, and that's a stupid thing to do, but things that's discretionary, like a visitor's bleacher or whatever, I think knowing which of those items to be considered would probably be helpful for the board's decision-making.
So we did attempt to be very conservative in our ask. If you look at the very bottom number, it's 44 million. You take the 30 out, we're only asking for 14 million. If you looked at 25, 26, we got funded at 18 million. Sans the pool, it's a very low capital request. And I think it's recognizing the capital that we already have funded, the large projects we have funded, and trying to be respectful of the 30 million is a big number. So we purposely didn't put stuff up, and we moved stuff out where we could afford to move stuff out.
Well, then maybe it should be a list of things that we should consider just like where the marginal choice is. Like you could do it both directions. Like if you were going to remove X million dollars more, this is the three things. If you were going to add, these are the three things, just to know kind of, because the decision is going to happen at the margin. It's not going to happen, well outside of that.
I hear the point. We did attempt to factor that in. The capacity issue is, is it worth asking for this if we can't really execute in that time period? So some of the items we pushed out for HVAC is a $12 million number. If you looked at last year's plan, that was actually scheduled to be requested in the year we're sitting in, but taking a look at where we're at and the possibilities, even realistic to sign a contract and spend that money, we said no. So let's push it out. But I totally hear you on the decision making on the margins. But I think it is important to remember, if you take that pool away, it's a very low routine capital request for the
X major building renovations. It's even with last year, because last year had 4. If you took the 5 out of last year,
Yes.
I guess, Dr. Jones, I guess we're looking long-term, at least from a board perspective, the only other thing I could think of that, like to Cody's pool example, I don't know if you still think preschool is something we need to be thinking about down the line, because that would be a capital expense.
I haven't figured it out yet, but I can tell you that it was very, very difficult when we had to add the additional class in September, this September, like just now, to find a room for pre-K. Because they need a restroom, it needs to be on the lower level. We have multi-story buildings and that's not helpful. So it's difficult. It's something that we need to tackle.
Does,
And the only other, Julian Curtis, that we're going to be refreshing that number, working with the chair of the building committee. There's some ADA money. If you go down to the interior building, there's some ADA money that's already set aside, planning for Julian Curtis. We think it makes a lot of sense if we can collapse that. So the building committee is actually been discussing that tomorrow at their meeting, if there's a way to consolidate it, and then we can we'll move that in the out year, we'll move it up. So that 869 that we've been carrying from last year will likely go up, but it'll be offset by a decrease in the outer years. And then it'll be nice just to say from an ADA perspective, we've completed the building. For right now, we're doing some ADA, and if we don't do it now, then we're going to come back in a couple of years to do it again. It just makes sense. If you're there, just keep going.
so not to labor, but and I know there's been a lot of funding for education reduced from state levels, or will be coming. And I assume that's mostly just in the operational. We're not, there hasn't been any discussion about reduction of funding in capital projects, right? Money that we're applying for, getting back, that's included in any of the projects that I just want to double check. I haven't heard
I'm not
anything.
aware of any
Okay.
negative adjustment on school construction grant awards.
I wasn't either, but I just wanted to make sure, I had my eye on the right stuff. Okay, thank you.
So that very high level, that's where we're at. At the business meeting end of this month, you have the more detailed sheets, and then you have another opportunity. And then I think later on, we'll vote on it, I think in October, the final for the adoption for capital. We like to clear capital out before we jump into operating. I purposely skipped over school lunch, but it is in there. The last year we had it funded by the school lunch program. The BET moved it into the general capital. The one thing, it's a big number. People go, it's over $500,000 for the equipment at all of our facilities. One thing that I get excited about, if you can get excited about food service capital, is we have a robust replacement schedule, which we have not had in the past. And so we got a healthy funding this year that we're sitting in of just over $500,000. And it's still a relatively healthy request, but that healthy request actually shows that we have not been replacing the equipment. And just case in point is we had over the summer, just a couple of days before school started, an issue at Julian Curtis, the oven. So the oven, we couldn't even find the date. So we didn't know how old it was. So that's the level of maintenance that we need to focus on. But I'll stop there. Miss anything?
No. Did anybody else have any other questions on capital before we move on to operating budget discussion? Obviously, more information is coming from, I know our budget committee met already with Ben and Mike, and everything's going to be coming towards us in more detail. Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess, Ben, can we assume that the ADA compliance line, that's the funding that's the ongoing funding of our ADA plan? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and appreciate you pointing that out. What we did do is we slowed it down a tad, because when we realized we shouldn't be asking for the full amount, so we took the amount that we thought the program should be and then built in an A&E request. So we need a certain amount of architectural engineering design done before we do the projects. So what we did here, that's what shows that. So that 600 will be just doing the A&E construction work, or the documents, then we'll go for the project itself. We're heavily funded. We have a very healthy capital budget already, cash on hand, and we're focusing on Western Middle School. So we're continuing to work on it, but here we just recognize we really should adjust the way we're presenting it. we have not changed our priority on it, just more of the funding realization.
And then I know the Ham Ave project is, the parking garage is underway. Remember last year, we accepted the donation for the sprinklers. Do we have a sense of when that might happen?
We do not. We've had a very short email exchange with the principal, so that has, I think with everything else, that is just put on the back burner, but we have not forgotten about it, but it's not, there's no date for install.
Thank you for bringing that up. I honestly thought it had already been installed, so it's good to realize. Any other capital questions before we move on to operating? Bueller? No? Okay. Let's roll on over to operating.
I'll just wait for the slide to show up. So you want me to jump in, or does the budget committee want to do any place study, or I can just look through the presentation? So
You go first, and then maybe I'll have a comment or two.
So we did meet with the budget committee earlier this week. They have seen this presentation, and I think everyone thought it was nice to move that conversation to the full board. Patrick is going to go through a couple slides, and I'll jump in on some of the slides as well. But you should have the hard copy, and we also have the slide deck going forward up there. But I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Okay. Cody, do you want to add anything before I start?
No, all you first. And then
Okay. All right. So we put together kind of like to take you through where we finished in the last school years on our budget spending. And then we have made some projections to kind of like the coming years to kind of like give you an idea what we are looking at. And then would like to kind of like get some comment and feedback regarding the direction of building the operating budgets for 22% in the early Novembers. So if you look at this page, this is where we finish. If you look at the top table, 2025 actual, we finished the year at 190.28 million of the spending. And then the 190.28 million, it is 98.6% of the budget. And it is kind of like the percentage of the budget is similar, kind of like the historical trend. There were some years that we kind of like have the budget balance less, but it is kind of like within the range of between the 1% to the 2% range of the budget balance throughout the history. When we look at the bottom table where you see the available budget that we finished the year with a 2.67 million balance of the budget of the operating. The 2.67 million, that means that is the 98.6% that we spend. And for the 2.6 million budget balance, we look into it, the three main drivers of the budget that it is unspent on the right-hand side that you see. Throughout the school years, there are about 15 FTE vacant positions throughout the whole school years. And that kind of like contributes to a savings of the salary where the position was vacant. And then the second thing is about the 350K of the overestimated on the extra pay in the budget assumptions that has been corrected in the current year that we are in now, in the 2025-26 budget. When we build that, we corrected that overestimations. And lastly, it is about the special ed out of district and also the settlement budget, where the actual spending is 1.2 million less than the budget that we have set aside for that out of district tuition and the settlements. So these three areas gets to the 2.7 million of budget balance. And out of the 2.7 million, I mean, we have agreed to create the newly non-lapsing account, which we put the 2.5 million of the budget balance into the non-lapsing account that will be used for the transportation purpose in the 25-26 school years. And then the other $176,000 is the fund balance that returns to the town. So let me stop there to see if there's any main questions.
I just wanted to say, in all the years I've sat here, we don't usually see that we have $1.2 million savings in budget for special education for out of district and settlements. So I just wanted to point that out. That's actually a really, really big deal. I know we're looking at it as numbers, but those of us like I know that are very focused on special education, this is huge for us. And I think we shouldn't just overlook it and talk about it in the fact that it's just a random number here. This is a big deal. And I just wanted to thank our administration and the staff for being able to do that. That's huge. So I wanted to point that out as a big thank you. We have more to go, but clearly, things are moving forward in a positive way. Mike? Yeah, please
Yeah,
do.
no, I think this is, the board has wisely, over the last few years, invested in new programs in-house. And the investment in those programs means we're able to support students more effectively here in the district. And as a result, we save a lot of money. Not only do we save money on lawsuits, we're able to treat our students, some of our most needed students, with the programs and services that they need and deserve. So this is exactly what we've been saying. We need to be doing, and now we're seeing dividends on it.
Yeah. Just a final point, we had always said that it takes a few years to see the returns of investment, and we're seeing that return of investment now. And I think that's huge for us. So, thank you for pointing out that that's part of the reason that we have some money
I
back.
would like to pile on just as
Pile on, bring it.
absolutely all the points are 100% valid, but I always say I'm the paid pessimist from the financial perspective. 1 year doesn't make a trend, so we are concerned, and you'll see in later slides we actually put that in there as a potential risk. But I don't want to take away any of the hard work, because I'm very confident the trend will continue, but we can't plan for that.
Certainly,
I don't want to take the fun away. I just wanted to
and every year is different. Every student and every, all the needs and all the other funding coming in is different. And it's true. It's really good to point out that it is not something we can count on happening year over year. But I still want to point out, because I think it shows positive in other ways on how those programs are doing, as Mike said.
Okay, so if it goes to the next page, if you look at the spending profile of the 190 million where we spend the money, you can see that 77% is spent on salaries. So, this is the big portions, the biggest portion of the spending in the whole operating budget, which is related to the employees, to the people, to the salary of the employees. So that is important to kind of like remember the impact when it comes to kind of like the budget constraint. And then on the next page, that's where you see we lay out kind of like the budget historical trend in here for the last 10 years. Oh, okay. So on the last 10-year budget historical trend, on this chart where you see the bar graph, the blue bar graph is the superintendent proposed budget versus the orange solid line that is the approved budget by the TAN, by the BET and the RTM. Where you can see, and then where you can see kind of like the fluctuation on the approved budget versus the superintendent proposed budget. The 2018 and 19 is an abnormality where the approved budget is higher than the superintendent ask. That is because of the accounting adjustment, where there is a budget transfer for the private school bus, the nurse, and also the print shop. So otherwise, that you can see all the other years where the BET and the RTM approved the budget versus the bar graph. When we look at the 10 years average, which is the dotted orange line, you see the 10-year average is at 2.9%. And the recent 3 years average of the approved budget is at the 3.83%. So that is where we stand kind of like in the historical trend of our budget request versus the approved budget.
So I will be honest, when I looked at it, I was finding it a little difficult to follow along with the bar graph with, all the different lines. So everything in blue is the superintendent's proposed budget, correct?
Yes.
And then dotted line is just your average, and the orange, the straight is what was approved.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, it was very hard for me when I was looking because it was pointing at the one tall year in 2024. So I was like, well, that's odd that you only have the 1 year of the proposed budget versus the rest being approved. So now I have a better understanding of it. You know, my brain didn't register it in the way it was written. Thank you.
And you can interpret that slide quite a different ways. We like to say, if you think about the SEC disclosure where it says past performance is not indicative of future results, that is true, but the numbers provide some clues on what the future may hold for us. So I think it's important just to sort of set in your mind where the funding history has occurred. And then if you go to the next slide, this is where we started looking at some of the headwinds. So where are we going?
Yes.
And so the very next slide, what I want to talk about is we're in negotiations with the teachers union. There's also another contract that's up. So the negotiations must occur at the table, not here or not in the public. So there's a lot of assumptions that we did not do. I want you to focus on the first column there where it shows you the total salary. We just assumed the same as last year. So that we see the growth there of the 4.1 million from 26. We said, well, what's going to happen next year? We just said, well, let's just take the same number again from a model perspective. We added the 4.1 million. Again, because of just some of the unknowns and because of where we're at, we didn't want to use any other assumption.
Asterisk placeholder.
Then you look at the middle there, we have additions. Right now, again, this is out of the gate, we have not spent administrative time. Do we need this or not? But as we build the list, we're anticipating almost 1.4 million of additions. The very first one, I think, is a classic example. It's Positive Pathways. That's a program that we all recognize. We just talked about the ROI on that with some of the sped costs. You need to add that to make sure you keep up with the students matriculating. So some of these are known. Some of these we have to still talk about. At the bottom, you see pre-K. I won't go through all of them, but again, we're saying here's what we know right now. We think we're going to have to add just out of the gate. What Patrick and I really struggle with is when you look at the bottom there, we highlight there. So we haven't made any decisions yet, but as we show you here, is it realistic that every single line item in the district will be held to zero? We did that, just again, from a model perspective, and we show the transportation cost. The transportation cost, it's a huge number when you look at a percentage standpoint, because you're going budget to budget, and here we can't account for the use of the non-lapsing. If you add the non-lapsing number in there, the percentage drops, but for the budget to budget, it's actually a big number. We'll have to make sure we communicate that when we actually build the budget. But budget to budget, it's a big increase. But the punchline here is just doing this very quick, simple model. It's a 4.2% increase. Just to get to a 3% increase, you have to reduce what's in front of you by 2.3 million.
And that's without having the new teacher contracts. And we know those never go down.
Yes. So there's significant headwinds that the district is facing. And here just out of the gate, we're already seeing that the request, again, going back to that slide, the request right now doesn't even align with the last 10 years or the last 3 years. Where are those adjustments going to occur? I think what ultimately we're going to get to is need direction from the Board of Ed on. We ended the year, I think, as we all recognize, it was a really rough year on the budget adjustment. None of us want to relive that. How do we get ahead of some of that? That's where we're at from 27. And just another way of looking at it, and we only have 2 more slides. If you go to the next one, Mike. Here we just decided to show you what is the impact to the taxpayer. So if you look at the middle there, the approved fiscal year 26, the operating budget is what's approved. That fixed line that says estimated, that's our estimated fixed costs that are actually budgeted at the town side. So when you add those two up, the Board of Ed is 247 million. We can all debate on the fixed charges. We think it's a relatively a solid number, but ultimately the town will come up with, when they do the guidelines, you see the number, but we're confident that's pretty close. So again, from a model perspective, you have an expense of 247 in 26. There's revenue that's on the town side. If we took the approach, if the Board of Ed did not exist, the revenue would not exist. So we just use that as a credit. When you take the revenue of about this, just under 6 million, you get the net of the 241 million. You do the simple math of just taking the gross with the grand list, come up with the mill rate. You get the mill rate associated with Board of Education operations. So that's the 26 shows you that 6.546 is the mill rate associated with the Board of Ed operations. And then if you have $1 million assessed home, it's 6,546 in taxes. You can do the math based on your property from the million. We just move that forward. Again, we show just based on that same slide that we showed before what our projected 27 number is, and you see the impact. The mill rate impact is about 2%. As you can see, the revenue only grows about 1%. We're just factoring in the state revenue is relatively flat. It's a known. Tuition, we've already made a big leap last year. That's why you can see the 5% growth in revenue in 26 was because of the adjustments the board made tuition. I think you're not going to, there's not a lot of room left there to sort of get to market rate. So we just have a 2% growth, but that gets lost when other ones are flat funded for the bigger amounts. So I think we've never shown this before on the taxpayer impact of our operations. And the last slide is the scary, this is the scariest one for Patrick and I, we have less than 2 months to present the budget. Actually, I was just looking at my calendar. It's 45 business days when the superintendent presents the budget. So this keeps us up at night because there's a lot of numbers we have to roll up. So the very last slide is we'd love to have a conversation with the board. Mike, if you can go to the next slide. That's the best. That's just opportunity to have a conversation to give this superintendent and administration just direction of how you'd like to see the budget presented. I don't know, Cody, you wanted to let us go first and then you go. So that's all we have on the presentation.
Yeah, I was just going to say before Cody goes first, I was just going to say the big question I was going to ask from you guys, because I know that we're tight on time, obviously, and from our budget committee is what we can do as a board to best support all of you guys so we can have, less placeholders, I would say, I guess, and a more, robust discussion. So I'm now going to turn it over to our budget chair, how we can support.
Yeah,
you.
all I would say is, I'll say the same thing I said in the budget committee meeting. My impression is that every year we do this dance where we go forward and we say, here's our budget. We have done everything we can to make it as low as possible, and it cannot possibly be reduced any further. And then the BET says, no, here's a new number. And then we turn around and say, oh, well, we went and did more work, and it turns out there's more things we can do. Not all of which people agree with, but things that weren't even considered at the front end. And that then erodes trust because you get into this cycle. Again, this is just you could argue, slightly cynical take, but you get into a cycle where there's less trust, so that whatever we say, they say that's not real, and we get in, and it just goes back and forth. And the victims of that are the administration, and also it's operationally hyper disruptive because we are making choices in May that if we had made them in December, it would be much easier for Tony and everyone to actually implement. And I think we have a very unique opportunity this year because last year was particularly drawn out and painful, but it required, last year gave the team time to really dig into a number of these things. So we kind of already have a fresh list of things to consider when we think about where the marginal spending decisions are. And I think what I would implore all of you to do as a lame duck, it will ultimately not be my problem, but is if we take this head on up front and we skip all of the dancing and and we say as a board to the administration, here's we dust off the list from last year at the end of last year and say, these are the specific changes that we think should be made, and we need you as an administration to go implement them. I think that would lend us a huge amount of credibility with the BET and potentially break this cycle that we have, where we lead with all the info and all the choices up front. To the extent they disagree with us, they can say, well, we cut it back a little bit, but everybody kind of knows what that incremental cut is going to versus these abstract paint with a broad brush cuts or changes, I should say. And so I think we have the list. We have a really good sense of it. We know where some of the changes are, which, by the way, are not, a lot of these are changes that we think are either neutral or positive for students, or at least some people think that. So it's like there's credible cases to be made. This isn't like, some dark draconian thing. So I just want to really push everyone to do that, because I think if we give clear instruction that that's what's needed, we can do it. But if we don't have the willpower to, then the same miserable dance will happen, and we'll end up in the same place, but we'll waste a bunch of people's time, and it'll be more operationally disruptive. That's my 2 cents.
I appreciate your 2 cents. Actually, it's a very good perspective to have. I would say, I think we're also in a unique position this year because of the tremendous reductions that we made in different areas and the changes we made to school start time, right? We had to go back to that. We had to reduce a lot of staff, et cetera. And we also have to take the time to see what those reductions, the impact that has in our schools and on our students, on their academic, and other areas. So I was going to say, it's certainly a discussion that we can have if there's things that we're looking to make adjustments to in programming or whatnot. But I think we also have to be very cognizant that significant changes were made due to that reduction to our budgetary ask. And we don't know the impact of those quite yet, other than the fact that, yes, we've all heard busing with our new company as it is at the start of every year, wonky. And we're hoping to get that adjusted as soon as possible. But, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but no, I just no, not about buses. Just in general, because I was going to say, we've made significant changes with the reduction in our budget, had to cut FTE and other things. And, we also know that there may be a reduction in funding from the state this year, which I'd love to be able, in our next discussion, if we have any knowledge of what that might be. I know there's a lot of discussion at the state, how that might impact us as well.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. I did say to one of the board members, I think it was yesterday or the day before, this is the first time I've really felt it. We're feeling it as a system, all of the reductions that were made, because usually you're very thoughtful. Even if you're going to go in and reduce one area, you don't hit 5 areas all at the same time. And so, we have adult ed and enrichment, which is normally up and running. It hasn't started yet. As you know, transportation is like the perfect storm, which none of us anticipated. We knew we were going to have new software. That alone is a big implementation. But then we added a change of start time. Plus, we have a new bus company, and it's been a challenge, admittedly, and we're trying to communicate with all of our families about that. So I think we're feeling it. It has been a challenging start, just trying to make sure that, we're staying on top of everything. So I think we have to be really thoughtful about this budget, and it is going to be, challenging. I think what you'll see in on the slide that I think it's the second or third one where it had those additions, like that co-teaching, we're committed to that. We have families that have been now in that building for multiple years. We have to add that position. It's not a choice. We're going to need more speech. We know that when we add pre-K classes along with that, one of the biggest areas for our littlest ones is speech and language. The outplacement, that could be one that we can monitor through now and the spring to see how we're actually going. Maybe we won't need $500,000, but keep in mind tuition goes up every year. This is the last year where they're going to be setting their own tuition, because the legislation that just passed, the state is actually coming in to start regulating that and looking at tuition. So will they increase tuition while they still have the power to do that? We just don't know. We're watching that closely. The same thing on number 4, the pre-K developmental delay legislation. What we've plugged in here is we think this could end up really being an additional 3 positions that would normally not be anticipated. And developmental delay is when students generally qualify in preschool. And then when they start in the K-5 area developmentally, you're not using the developmental delay category. What they did through legislation this year is they extended that to the age, I believe it's 9. So now your early years in elementary, it's much, much easier to qualify for services under developmental delay at that age than it is like a learning disability or something of that nature. So we do think we'll need additional positions. This 6.0 learning facilitator, this is something we actually had to add back in this year from the budget reduction. If you remember, we cut all of the LFs in secondary. And what happened is the high school still has their program administrator positions. So they have support. We realized in the elementary, or sorry, in the middle school, that was the only level they had nobody left. And so the principal said they don't need them all reinstated. If we could just have a team leader for each team, that they would make it work. And so we did that this current year because otherwise we were leaving them without anything. And then the BOE attorney, we've increased that where we have more money for the Board of Ed specifically. And then, of course, we have pre-K. So, and I don't see that pre-K is going to, trend slower. I wish it would. And those are just all given that are built in. And the other thing, when you look at like all of these zeros on the bottom, well, there's no way electricity is going to be 0. I mean, we know that. So some of these zeros we just know that that's not going to be the case. So it is going to be a challenging budget.
Sorry, Ms. Costin?
So I just wondered, because there has been so much talk about reversing our start times, if we wanted to go back to what we had previously for next year, is there any idea what that might cost?
It's not only the cost, I think it would be incredibly difficult to do. But you think we were already $2 million in the hole this year. Plus we know we're going to have to plug in another 2 million next year. And I'm not even sure that would do it. We would need probably additional just to go back. Like it's a big number.
Like 4 million?
No, I think it's higher than that, but we're not, because we're still trying to implement what we're doing right now as of today. We'll be analyzing over the next couple of weeks, number of buses that we cut. Are we able to actually really efficiently run these routes? Or are we going to need a couple more buses? Are we going to be on time to pick up our special needs children across the district? Or do we need to add an extra bus there? I mean, it'll take us, which it always does, the first couple of weeks of the school year. But it's a big number on top of just what they just shared on the budget. It would be on top of that.
One more question. We've certainly heard feedback from some neighbors that are unhappy with the buses currently parked at school. Is there a plan for where we will be, speaking of buses, actually putting the buses? And is that a cost to the district, or does the bus company absorb that cost?
Yes, there's a plan. No, we're actively working on the concept. It's several moving pieces, and it's not part of the bus company's responsibility. I think the master plan here is we're having some temporary issues of where do we put these buses, but because we never had agency of where we put our buses, had limited negotiation power with vendors because they essentially said, well, you can't put them anywhere else, so you have to use us. We have the space. So I think temporarily we're going to have some growing pains with that, but once we solve for that, we're really going to set ourselves up for options going forward with vendors. But right now they're at the high school. The superintendent, we've communicated and we've talked to the high school administration. We're not moving past that magic date of September 15th for the students. So those will be moved out. But we have chased down a lot of options. We keep hitting some dead ends. We have some live options now, but I can't tell you this is exactly where they're going right now. But that's where we're at right now.
I thought we had a place for them originally, but Sophie?
Yeah, I just have a question. Is the town helping you like coordinate? I feel like the town would have space maybe available to facilitate this.
I've had several conversations with them. I think helpful with the old Greenwich train station because they had the capacity there. But other options we chase down, it just has negative impact to their operations, or they use it during the days we actually need to use it. So but they have been helpful.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, because I thought when we had a discussion on where the buses were going to be parked, that it was a space, a town space that we had located that they would be sitting, no?
It was never a town
Okay.
space.
Mike?
This is a retreat and we're trying to nail down the aspect of the concept of board guidance and where we might want to support advise. Two thoughts come to mind, both of which have been mentioned earlier. On the start time issue that Ms. Costin brought up, I think it would make sense come December when we're having those budget, those budget conversations to, by then, if we're able to have a breakout, I understand the challenges now, but if come December, if we can have a breakout of what do we think a return to last year's bus schedule might look like, having that kind of sense of number as best we can would undoubtedly help inform that conversation. And then to Cody's point, as someone who's not a lame duck, I think Cody makes a very good point. We talked about this at the budget committee. We made a couple of very strong, we had a couple ideas that came out, some of which were really had the support of central administration, that because of the late date and the late hour and the spotlight and all of the conversation, all of the drama of last spring, it really didn't make sense to be able to move forward to in a meaningful way. However, in a more thoughtful manner right now, revisiting some of those aspects, particularly around the reorganization of the high school, which we know we talked about, and is I think something that it sounded like last year there was a lot of there was a lot of support for centrally. So if that's the case, talking more about that now before the budget makes a lot of sense.
Mike,
I was just going to say, as an aside, I know, well, part of, I think, the regulation that we're going to be discussing next came out of that part of that discussion. I know we have some members of the board who are also starting to talk about it, but I would just caution and say that is a discussion that we can and should have, certainly if that's what members of the board would like to do. But it shouldn't be born out of budget. The changes should not be based on a need for budget. If that's something that we feel is best for the students, I'm just putting it out there, I know you know that, but I just want to make sure that it's heard by others that it shouldn't be done due to a budgetary reason. If it is something that we feel is going to be best beneficial for our students, I think, and again, I know that there was discussion that we had here as a board, and I do think that it is ripe discussion to be had. I know Sophie's nodding her head too. So I think it can be added as a discussion, but I would caution us not to do it based on budget. If that's just for others to hear outside of this space. I know you guys know, but Cody was waiting to say something, and then Laura.
just a few quick things. I'm not sure I agree with Mike that I think there can be things that the central administration is not in favor of, which they may have perfectly good reasons to not be in favor of, but we as the governing body may have different reasons that override them. So I think we should be prepared to push for things and evaluate them and then make that call, because that's ultimately why there's a governing body. Otherwise, we would just defer on everything. I just lost my train of thought on Karen. What were you just talking about? The budget thing. I think we have to be, to the point that Ben made. There's a certain range of budget increases that we get, and if we do the thing where we say we're not going to bother trying to build a budget in line with those, we just, I can tell you how that movie ends, and it wastes a ton of time, and it's really operationally damaging. So it's great. We should consider all the things that save money and are good for students, and then we have to actually not treat resources like they're unlimited either, and make budget choices too, and try to the extent we can come in line with something that is reasonable, whatever that means, it will save so much time and effort, and we'll end up in the same place. That would be the thing that I'll just keep repeating over and over again until I leave in 4 meetings.
Not like you're counting down or anything.
Yeah.
Laura?
Just a question, is the attorney budget line item, is there any science behind that, or is that sort of a level spend? Because I think we've had more than that in our attorney legal line item category.
That was the number of expenses incurred last
Ah.
year.
Okay.
That's something I'd also like to put a pin in. Obviously, we have some outstanding on, bills that still need to be paid in that area and are still waiting to figure that out. But I know that that was a discussion we as a board wanted to have as well, going forward about representation. Am I correct? As, because we've had issues in the past year or so, and even before that going forward. So that's something we can certainly as a discussion, have a discussion of as a board. Sophie?
I wanted to respond, Cody, to your suggestion, because I do think it's a good idea to talk openly about how we can improve the schools and within kind of what we anticipate the budget might be. But I do feel like looking back, I don't think that last year, if we had been thinking our budget would have been much less, that we all would have chosen to cut change the start times and go through all of that. And we were really kind of forced into doing that by having the budget cut so late. I mean, and we were given the indication that our budget was maybe going to be okay, so I feel like I want to correct the record a little bit, that I don't really see that there would have been a different budget process that we would have gone through last fall, where we would have arrived at the number that we were ultimately granted in April.
The choices that we were given in April, May were completely different than the choices that we evaluated at the budget committee when we set up the budget. So it was only the forcing function of the budget changes that even brought to light some of those discussions. If we had started at that point, I think you actually probably would have ended up with a budget with higher spending, arguably, and certainly much less friction involved. When we went through the choices to make in the first stage, like there were 20 line items that we were talking about in budget committee meetings in March or April or whenever, I can't remember exactly when it was, that never came up in the September to December period. And to be fair to the administration, I think the forcing function, like it takes time to go through these. They have lots of things on their mind. So I don't think anyone was hiding the ball, but I think that it presents a great opportunity for us because now we already have it kind of read. We have a much more thoughtful list already ready to go. And like by pulling that forward and making it part of the conversation, as opposed to just doing the things to add, but not revisiting those, I think that's where we can get a little extra juice.
I would just say I would respectfully disagree in one regards. Like some of those things that came up in March and April that we had as a list were things that we as a board shot down because we didn't want to do it. We didn't want to reduce programming in certain areas. They came about simply because we had to look at them. So I see both sides of the coin here. And so that's why I was saying, I think that there should be a happy medium somewhere in there. I think that's something we as a board can certainly have as a discussion. If it's something that the budget committee wants to look at and make some recommendations or discussions, I'm happy to have that. I know Kathleen had also as a budget member had her hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say I think you're right. There's a happy medium. There's an argument both ways. Having done this for way too many years, I do feel like every time we present a budget, it's always cut. So I do worry that even if I came up with the most brilliant move, there would still be but we'd like more. So there's a part of me that always worries about that. And then, but there's always options. And I do feel like maybe just to give the administration a little cover here, they were forced to probably put things on the table that they wouldn't necessarily have done. There might be nuggets that came out of that. There are other things. I mean, they could also suggest increasing class size, right? That's not something we'd want to do, but that's obviously going to be like a budget mover. Okay, so you would want to do that. I would not want to do that, but okay. But so these are the things that, I never knew that, for example, and now we just had that discussion. And so that's good to know.
I wrote that in an op-ed 4 years ago.
I obviously didn't read it. Okay, so, but which goes to show you how many op-eds, what they do. But anyway, I think that it's important that we have this discussion. I will say that this is a little scary. Let's just go back to the numbers for a second, okay? So without bringing politics into it, this analysis, looking at the data of the past, suggests that we're going to have to do something, right? And so I don't think we can go in and be blind about it. I don't think we can leave and set Tony up for failure to then have 6 months of basically endless budget meetings and then making people and our students, let's not forget our students, because I feel like that somehow is not mentioned often enough, not by you guys, by others. And I think that they went through a lot. Like you think about those high school kids and when they came out and they were upset about things. So to the extent we can get in front of some of these issues, I think we should. To the extent we can be thoughtful about it, I think we should, but only if it enhances student outcomes. And so that analysis, there might be things that do enhance student outcomes and happen to save money. And if those two things do line up, then like go for it, right? But that's an analysis we have to do, and we have to do it quickly. And I think that we could commit to doing that, and in a retreat style might be helpful. And we have a lot more information coming in over the next couple of weeks that also is a big factor in this.
Right,
So-
we're going to get the, data on student achievement, right? All those figures coming forward for those listening. Cody?
So if Ben's information is correct, in 6 of the last 10 years, the approved budget was at the requested amount. So I think there is room for optimism that if we do it in a certain way, we can get it approved. I think the key thing, Karen, to your point about that we were opposed to things, whether people are opposed to them or in favor of them, I think the key thing is to actually consider them. And they never were brought up until way later. And so just we know there's some material things to consider. And I think there are some things that are very ripe for the board to say, well, we're going to, we should do this anyways, because you could understand why the administration would be against them. I keep losing my train of thought. Too many things in my computer just went into hibernation. I had one other one. I don't know what I'll come back to it.
I'm just going to say, and I know Tony has something to add too. I mean, I'm going to just put forward the discussion that we had on ALP. Was the discussion, and that's something that the board has stood behind for years and years and years, not wanting to reduce. And that came forward and this board still didn't want to reduce it. And it wouldn't have been suggested except for needing to find, some way to meet that budget number. So I like I said, I don't disagree.
But-
I'm just using that one as an example.
But that's not an example because the ALP was in the original discussion around the budget in September, October, November.
And we said no then.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
there were like 20 things that were not that came up later.
Because we
That's
had
my
no
point.
place else to look. And, but I'm saying, I think that it's good that you're bringing it forward because we as a board can stand behind what we think is important and where we want to invest our funds for our students. And I don't disagree that that's a good discussion to have. And then I wanted to hand it to Tony and then you can.
Wait, I remember the other thing, just
Sure.
to be a little nitpicky with what Kathleen said. I'm not sure that it's without consideration to student outcomes. It's where you have, because if we were spending $1 trillion for a positive but de minimis student outcome, you would say that's a waste. There are some dollars that are spent that maybe have a very slight impact that if they weren't spent could be spent somewhere else. So I don't think the bar should be, can you identify anyone that is negatively impacted? It's, can the dollars be spent better in some other way?
Well, you just said it in a longer way, which is what I said we need to discuss and look at where we're putting our investment, right? And I think that that is a very important discussion for any board to have. And I welcome that as a discussion. And I do want to hand it to Tony. And I know Kathleen looks like she might have it. No, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was going to enhance this chart as I'm just sitting here listening, because I think you all have good points on both sides, but what's not reflected in here, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19. I can guarantee you the superintendents who presented that budget did not think 2% was okay. Because when I started, our math books were 20 years old. Some of you remember that. We had no consistency across 11 elementaries. We didn't have reading materials. And that's because every year we cut, literally when I started, we had 0 for like the curriculum line. We'd cut it all out in order to try to make 2% work because everyone wanted to protect people. And so we were to the point, and that's why it was hurting us academically. It wasn't the right thing to do, and it's not, and that's not reflected in this chart. And the only reason we're staying low, even when I've been here, like in 2021, 21, 22, ARP, I mean, that's COVID money. We had just in one grant, we had $9 million. That is what restored our curriculum. That is what really got us to the point that at our next retreat, you'll see the results we're getting. And if any of you saw the article in the paper today it's fantastic. And I mean, just the growth in our Title I schools, but that's because we have resources again. And so I think it's balancing both of those thoughts. But when you look at this chart, those things that are behind there's a lot behind those numbers, and 2% and 3% will not sustain this district to do what we are doing right now. Unless there's some huge radical something that somebody knows to do that I'm not aware of to get to like a 3% and 2% and get the results we're getting.
I mean, the discussion that you're having is exactly that. And I can pull my notes from the past 10 plus years. And it was every year around budget, it was the same thing, which was, we can cut these things, but this is not sustainable in the long term. We can't, there were years we had to cut not just purchase of school books and textbooks, which you saw this year, they were so outdated that we had no choice because they weren't, they weren't being renewed by the publisher. We had areas where we pulled professional development and training for teachers, and we had teachers training teachers, which only goes so far. They weren't being sent out to conferences to learn what was going on around the country in other districts that were, succeeding in ways that we weren't, in areas that we weren't. And it's important to have some of those things. And we said every single time, this is not sustainable. This is not sustainable. And so I said, when I looked at this budget with the graph or chart, it was very frustrating and confusing for me. I was trying to, and it's true, I didn't even think about the fact, as you brought up, that some of these are low because we had, artificially deflated because we had funding from ARP. And I think that should be noted on here too. Another asterisk, double asterisk, I don't know, however you want to do it. Flashing lights, just because it's a reminder. And even I who lived through it, forgot that. Yeah, Mike?
So I think what Tony just described sounds like it was a very thoughtful financial process taken up by the superintendent and the board over the last years, in contrary to decisions in years prior, where it sounds like some of the tough decisions weren't made. And what Tony just described was how at that moment in time, when she came in and over the last few years, making some tough decisions, even before this past year, that prioritized student achievement, prioritized things at the cost of, some decisions that probably would have been more comfortable. And now we're at, to Cody's point, now I think we're at the moment of time where all those decisions might have been made, but we have the opportunity to look at, given the same financial pressures, we have the opportunity to look at, well, the way we've been doing things, over the last 20, 30 years, is that necessarily the way we should be doing things? And are there systems and structures in place, in our different buildings and in our different structures, that now we have the opportunity to make some tough calls for the benefit of our system? So I think it's a different question than we had a couple of years ago, but I think it's still an opportunity for us to use the financial pressures for good governance.
Which brings us all back to the fact that, much like Cody started with, and we've all said, I think it's a good time and an opportunity for us to take a good look and see where we want to put those investments, in programming and students and other areas. And I welcome that discussion. I think we haven't had it in a long time, and it'll give us an opportunity to really, see what's necessary and important and where we need to focus investments for future. No, I don't know if Cody, one more.
Just
Yeah.
given that it's a retreat, just for the practical application of this conversation, my request is to have a more built out set of marginal choices, what the incremental programs are that you would add with extra spending and what the incremental changes are that you would make with less spending, because I think that's what will allow us to drive some of the decision making. Also, just to say a bleak note, it is totally long-term unsustainable, but that's a Hartford issue because of the Municipal Employee Relations Act, which you guys can comment on later.
This would not be a
The
meeting
union-
or a retreat without you mentioning Hartford.
Yeah.
I'm like my bingo card is
They're gonna
flipping.
eat, they're gonna eat the entire budget. That's the way.
Does anybody else have a question or discussion or topic that they want to bring up in regards to operating? If not, I know we have a regulation and to discuss, and then that's it. Anyone? No? Nope. All righty. Thank you both for a very robust preview and discussion and some very think you've got us thinking. So I appreciate that. And now we are moving on to academic informational item. It's a regulation, which as the board, and I'm just going to knows, but I'll remind people in the public, regulations are something that, certainly are shared oftentimes with the board, but it's not something the board approves. And it's, how the schools run, take our policies and use those to run the actual school. But I think this is a really good one to discuss, as a lot of these things are things that we've all discussed and known are part of the requirements and policies, but were never really memorialized in black and white. I think it's really important. So I really appreciate that you did that. And I will turn the mic over to you.
Sure.
Dr. Jones?
So I'm actually very excited about this regulation because it does exactly what it's titled, and it's about consistency. And I think if you remember at the end of last year, I had asked each house administrator, I think it was 14 questions, and they each answered them independently from one another. And when you looked at that document, there was no consistency, and we all realized that. And so, to the credit of our middle and our high school really are the ones that had to work on this a lot, because elementary, and I think some of you have been out in the buildings have recognized that you can walk in 11 different elementary schools, and if you see foundations, it looks the same in all 11 schools. So we have a lot of consistency there. So I'll just walk you through each level very quickly. So elementary, again, these are things that for the most part we are already doing, other than the very last one. We worked on the new report card all last year, got feedback there from not only PTA, but from our teachers. There was a committee that will be rolling out this year, and it's going to be so much better because most of our parents, as they went through elementary, said these really aren't very helpful and don't tell us a whole lot. Now what's on there is you'll know where your child needs, more support based on maybe it's double digit addition or whatever it is. But it's just very easy to read and very family friendly. So we're excited to roll that out.
Can't wait to see those.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Middle school and high school worked very hard. We started with one document and it looked different than this. And then the middle school principals came together and they started talking about how things are done at all three of the schools, which of course, some things were similar and some things were very different. And then they started to coalesce around, okay, what is it that we really believe is best for kids? And that's been a real focus for the whole leadership team this summer. That's every decision we make, and we say that all the time, but then our practice should also reflect that. So when you look on some of these bullets, you'll see if you flip over for the middle school to the next page, that top bullet is like per marking period, what is reasonable for how many grades? And some of you have shared with me over the years that you'll have a teacher that would give 2 grades a quarter. And I actually have had a teacher who gave 2 grades for a semester where somebody had reached out. And so even though some of this was kind of talked about in different guidelines over the years, it wasn't memorialized anywhere. So in middle school, they came up with 10 formative assignments, and then they talk about what those are at the end of a marking period. It's just very specific. So teachers know the expectations, parents will know the expectations, because we'll share this with PTA and obviously push this out for parents as well. The one thing that is, the second bullet is a big one for middle school. And this is where if a student's not satisfied with their performance on an assessment, they can request to reassess. Now, that gives still a lot of flexibility to the teacher, because when it says reassess, they have different ways that they can do it. It could be meeting with the teacher, doing test corrections, like they've really left it fairly open. Western has been doing this already. They already have this practice. Central was a little mixed. Eastern really didn't have this. And so it's probably the biggest, discussion at Eastern on the first day back this year, second day back when they talked about it. But it's only if they make less than 80, because the other thing we're very focused on this year is health and wellness of our students. And we have students who would make a 94 on something and then want to go and reassess just because they want 100 or a 99. And with the 80%, what they've done is that it's not an average of both scores, but you can also only earn up to 80. So if the student makes a 60 mastery of learning, so you're also not penalizing the student who made an 84 because you didn't want them to reassess, but it's trying to look at the mental health side and the mastery of learning. And then, prompt feedback. And that's, again, something that people have really shared with us, that assignments should be graded and returned within 5 school days. That like major assignments, like a research paper, may take 10 days if it's a really big project. And that, again, tests and assessments should be returned within 5 days. And the other thing that, again, came from the discussion at the end of last year, if they have not got their assessment or their quiz or their test back, you shouldn't be giving another one. So giving them a major test, and then somebody might have taken 15 days to grade it, but they had already been given the next assessment and they didn't have the feedback from the previous. So, and that sounds like, it's very logical, and there's nothing that should be radical about that, but we have over 900 teachers, and everybody, approaches things a little differently. So
I was going to say kudos, because Kathleen, I can speak on a personal note from that. Kathleen and I had our children in a summer program for math, and they were getting tested on things without getting their prior tests back to know what they needed to work on and to learn. And we were like, well, how can they be tested going forward if they don't know where they failed to learn beforehand? And I while I would think people first looking through this, seeing a student could retest would be, think it may be unfair, but I think the point that we're looking for, like you said, is mental health. It's not about the actual grade. It's about understanding the concepts that they're learning, right? And it's making sure that they have those concepts before they move on, so that they can actually improve. Because if you fail to learn something at the start and you don't master it, building upon a false knowledge does not benefit that student. So this is great.
So when you get to the high school, again, all the house administrators, Ralph, they all worked on this as a team. I presented what I thought was a starting point to help them understand what I wanted them to do. Then they went off and worked independently. Then we all came back together, and it was really good for them, because every house administrator, again, had a little bit different approach in what their house normally did. A lot of it mirrors the middle school, because we really want our kids in middle school to be prepared when they get to high school. For instance, like the number of grades, they're very similar. You'll find the language is slightly different because it's high school, but if they move like from one teacher to another, they should expect the content and pacing is followed. And that sounds very simple, but we're a large high school. There are a number of reasons why students change classes, and they're not on the same pace. And so we're really reiterating that. We all believe that's the right thing to do, but we know that we've had some areas where that hasn't happened. The midterm and finals need to be similar across. This is where we are today. And then just as a reminder too, this will be a growing document. We'll continue to analyze, but consistent in rigor and format across the same courses to measure the student achievement. So it doesn't mean they have to be necessarily exactly the same. And we had a lot of discussion about this. They may have 5 different essay questions they've all developed, and maybe one teacher really wants to give this question, another one may want a different question, but they're the same content and rigor. So again, trying to give a little bit of teacher autonomy there, but making sure we have the consistency. The way we apply curves, some teachers curve, some teachers don't. If they're teaching the exact same course, they should apply the same curve to any midterm or final assessments. Now, I know that that's a whole nother discussion about finals and midterms that you wanted to have. So I encourage us to still have that as a board. I think that's a really valuable conversation, but this at least gives us, again, a little bit of consistency. Let me look here. Okay, the next one is a big one where it says students enrolled in an AP class. And again, this bubbled up at the end of last year. We had students who were literally in the middle of taking AP exams, and then they were having to take a final in the same class, and really like right when they're preparing for other exams. And that just didn't make a lot of sense to us. But again, it was teacher by teacher. And everybody has their reasons. I didn't mean that in a, disparaging way, but we felt like that's something we needed to really be more consistent with. So if they are in an AP class and they take the AP exam, they are not expected to take the final. But we also talked about, well, what about the student that wants to take it? Maybe they're sitting at an 88 and they want to take the final, and they can work that into their schedule and they're very confident about the content. So they can take it if they want to, for those students that want to lift their grade. Using the same reporting across the high school, which we pretty well do that anyway, obviously in Aspen, but not every teacher was always getting their grades in Aspen. So in a timely manner. So again, that kind of dovetails off the middle school. And then down the bottom, you'll see prompt grading is necessary to provide high quality feedback. This is kind of the same thing you saw in the middle. It's a little bit more detailed here, where it talks about this also applies to students who are IEPs, 504s, which is a little more complex than the high school. And it has that number of days. And again, most of this was not really new, but it just was not applied consistently, and having it in a regulation just carries a lot more. It's also posted on the web so our parents can find it and they know what our expectations are. This has their major assignments and how long those take. Again, some of the same things. And a different bullet, just from the very bottom, third from the bottom, grades cannot be based on subjective participation grades. And that they could do a discussion, Socratic seminars with a clear rubric, but that was supposed to have already been in place. And again, I've heard from people that we were still giving participation grades depending on the teacher. And we really wanted on mastery of what they're learning. And then that the high school needs to be auditing grading consistency. So if we're going to say you need X amount of grades, we need to make sure that that's what we're doing. And so at the end of the semester, we'll look for those outliers. Also in just grading consistency, 4 teachers teach the same course. If this teacher has all, let's say C's, and this teacher has all A's, and, what does that look like if we have an outlier? And do we need to pull that department together really to be discussing, are we grading our essays in the same way? And that's where you get into those like blind assessments, and you take student papers, teachers come together and they grade each other's and then actually come back together and talk about it. We may need to do some of that, or we may find that we're actually very consistent, but we need to at least audit it, which we've really never done. Now, the things that aren't in the high schools and middle that we talked about, we had a long discussion about just how things are weighted in general. Tests, assessments, and all of that. And in the end, the administrators, both middle and high school, said, can we take time this year and we're going to work on it? Again, like Western is already consistent. The math, like in middle school, Mike Reed's already worked with the whole math team, so they're all pretty consistent how they approach it, but it's kind of all over the place. And so we're going to take the year to do that. Same way at the high school, there is no consistency really in weighting. And so they want to take the year, and whether or not each department is able to be more consistent or consistency across the high school, but we're going to let that bubble up from all the discussions and work they're going to do with the staff this year. The retake and mastery at the high school, we actually think that that's a good thing in high school. And the House administrators actually were quite supportive of that. But they need to talk about it because it is a radical change for high school to have that mastery of learning focus for a lot of the teachers. So again, they're going to work with, as a House administrator, with their content areas, and all come back together to see what that actually looks like. The other thing that I am very interested in, and we talked a lot, and it was on the original document, is looking at how we weight like our AP and honors, because over the last couple of years, we've even talked, when Joe was on the board, he would talk about ranking. And I would always say, well, it kind of hurts us because some students will just choose to take honors because it's weighted the same as AP. And we only get like on the rankings aspect of it. And not that that's what's important, but you only get the value if they're in AP or IB, which we don't offer IB. But it's also, this has come up a little bit from some of the teachers. I don't know how many. Ralph said there was a committee last year of teachers that actually talked about this. And right now they get a 1.0 bump. So just to give an example, if you make a B in a course and you get that 1.0 bump in honors or AP, you would have a 4.0 for your B. So what we have talked about is that if a student in fact takes the AP test, then they get a value of like another 0.25. And there are some districts that do that across the country, but if they don't take the test, it's weighted the same as honors. But it's also to encourage the students, if you're going to be in an AP test, be courageous enough to actually take the assessment, because it is great preparation, number one, for kids that are going to college. And it actually recognizes the rigor of an advanced placement, even just the test itself. They're very rigorous. So that's kind of where we are as of today, but I feel like we made a ton of progress in trying to get more consistency. And so we welcome feedback. And again, we'll be talking about it throughout the year.
I was going to say, I have two questions, and then I know Sophie and Jen have some. But first, before I do anything, if I wasn't speaking right now, I'd be standing up and clapping and whatever. This is fantastic. This is something I think that we've all been in discussions that we as a board have been asking for, because, it's really important, even though we know these things are there, but to have them memorialized, because some teachers don't know, or they're newer, or parents don't know. The only question I have that I didn't see memorialized in here, and you may not have an answer to, is, we did have discussions in the past. I know there was maybe not a regulation, but it was known that there were a certain number of tests or long-term projects a student could be given at once, right? So students were only supposed to have like 2 exams, midterms or whatever, 2 exams on any given days. So, or something like that. I don't remember exactly. I can go back and look, but I didn't know if that was brought up at all.
No, not as part of this. And I don't really know what we have in place right now, but I can certainly follow that up.
And I mean, just not like a pop quiz or a small quiz, but for students were given major, whatever it is, formative tests, or major tests. They were stressing out if they had 3 in one day, or there was something. I can go back and look. And then the other question I had was, and I know this is somewhere else, I think it's memorialized, how long teachers have to respond to student emails with questions, or vice versa. I don't know if that's memorialized anywhere, or it might be in here only in the fact that, again, students sometimes get docked if they have a question on a project or homework, and the teacher doesn't have the opportunity to see that in time or get back to them in time for whatever the reason is. And so they're delayed in turning in that work. Those are the only questions I had to bring up. Sophie, and then Jen, and then Cody.
I just want to say also about the encouraging students to do it. 2 other great reasons to take an AP is it can help you place out of requirements in college. And I really appreciate that, having 2 kids that are in college and seeing so many of their classmates at Greenwich High School were placed out of basic coursework their freshman year, which is a really big advantage academically, but then also can save you a lot of money. If you take a whole bunch of APs and do well, you can graduate college early. So, it's also another good reason to take an AP class and take the exam.
Ryan almost had the opportunity to graduate over a year in advance, and I said, no. I said, you will stay. So, okay, so Jen.
This is fantastic. So thank you. And thank you to all the administrators that worked on it and came together. Just a very quick question. What is the plan for the administration to review to make sure that these are being followed? Is it kind of like a monthly check-in? Is it a, quarterly check-in? How are we looking at it to make sure that we are keeping to the consistency?
Yeah, it really is the house administrator that's over the content area. It's up to them to monitor it. And that's why we put the bullet in here about auditing it. And you hope that somebody wouldn't wait until the very end of the semester to then go, oh, let me go check and see how people are doing. So, we're leaving it up to the administrators that they're actually going to audit, if that makes sense.
note, it's also incumbent upon the student to be checking their Aspen to see if things are being put in a timely fashion as well and make reminders, I'm sure. But it shouldn't just be on the, I'm just saying it shouldn't just be on the teacher. Students have to be, on top of it too.
Oh, no, absolutely. But in terms for the board to also understand the feedback, getting a report perhaps in 3 months or so, just a couple of things that saying, yes, we're instituting this
Good idea.
consistency policy and or regulation rather, consistency in programming. It's going really well. The teachers like it, the students like it, any feedback might be appreciated.
Cody, and then I think Mike's hand went up.
I would strongly encourage you to just wait, give the AP grades an overall boost. If you want to do an extra boost for taking the test, fine. But I think you get some weird incentives. Like if the idea is AP class is harder, then give the grade more weight. But if the idea is you want to incentivize kids to take AP tests, there might be better ways. But what might end up happening is kids that don't care about the AP test will just take it like, your college you're going to doesn't accept it. You walk in the room, you get a 1, our scores go down, and kids' grades go up. Like, that's not a good incentive. Yeah, you'd be like, oh, I pay $80 and my GPA goes up 0.25, and I just walk in and sit there for an hour and leave. It's like, like the point is the AP classes are harder, so the grade should reflect that. So just do the weight directly on it.
Mike, yeah.
And APs are the single highest ROI thing for any high school student to do. It's amazing. Like, it's $80. I don't know what it costs, but it saves
It's a
you
lot
5%
less than a
college credit.
credit it costs in college. Mike?
I was going to say the same thing. I tied to that, I worry about the grade scale and the grading policy and leaving that out of this. I worry about leaving that over the course of the year, because I know that could take a lot of teeth and a lot of the consistency out of it. You have one math class where assessments are worth 60%, and you have the same math class across the hall where assessments are worth 30%, and you have a very different grading policy. So if there's a way to get to some kind of at least departmental consistency sooner rather than later, mid-semester or end of semester instead of the whole year, I think that would guarantee that a lot of the transparency, that a lot of the consistency isn't lost in the grading policy bubble.
Very good point. Kathleen?
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of credit for this because I think you've heard from all of us parents as well as board members that would like to see some consistency, and this lays it out clearly. I completely agree on the AP thing, and I actually do appreciate your point, because you're right. If it's just to encourage you to take the test, but in fact, the course is harder, right? They accomplish a lot more curriculum by May. And there are classes that go beyond AP, right? And so those classes, like multivariable calculus, right, of course, needs to get a bump as well. It'd be unfair for those kids not to. You do? Okay. All right. So there are things like that
And the college level courses, which is what AP is, yeah.
right, exactly. But I think this is great, and I think we should help you accomplish this, because I think that's wonderful that the high school is working on it. But from a board perspective, we should be looking at comparables. And so if the high school wants to keep working on it, that's great. But I think that we should be looking at, what is Darien doing? What's New Canaan doing? What's Wilton doing? Because that's who we're competing against, and especially in the rankings, but also when our kids apply to college, right? And so our GPAs are at a disadvantage versus those kids. And frankly, I think they go through the course of study guide, and obviously most of our kids do fine. And so colleges have figured it out. However, why not help them get to, and if it's going to help us in the ranking, but also just in our comps, and for some of our students, it can make a difference. And maybe a college is looking at them and they have the right number in front.
Happy to divvy up different districts amongst everybody, take a district and do a deep dive.
Well, I bet you have it. So let the professionals do it and then bring it to us and then have us comps and let the board take a vote on it. I mean, let's take this off your plate, frankly.
Anyone else? No? Well, this is impressive. It's 8:41. Very happy to wrap this up. And again, I think obviously you could hear a reflection from all of us that we're really happy to have seen this last regulation. And, you know, again, much like Kathleen said and others, if there's whatever there is that we can do as a board to help support this, I think that would be fantastic. I think that this really helps the students have a better understanding of what is expected and, you know, and the teachers becoming more consistent as well. So I really appreciate that, you know, even though I don't have kids there at the moment. So does anybody else have anything? If not, I know we will see you guys next week and I know somebody has a motion to make. Cody, do you want to make it?
A motion to adjourn.
Who wants to second it? Lada. Okay. All in favor? Awesome. Thank you. And thank you guys to the members of the board for your thoughtful discussion points this evening.